Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha Priti, and I am your host through this Bhagavad Gita. Me and all of my family of seekers, which I'm so happy to be here with this morning. Thank you guys for waking up early and jumping on this call and sharing your hearts. It's so wonderful to do this together and to study the Gita together and relate our lives and experiences to it. And so honored to be walking this path with you all. And today we are still in chapter 2. We're in a really fun section right now in chapter 2. We're in a section, Arjuna just asked a question, how basically a perfected yogi conducts themselves. He asked how a perfected yogi restrains their senses, engages their senses, responds to life's ups and downs. What is their key characteristics? And he's asking all these questions because he's trying to figure out if such a person would fight. So he wants to do the right thing. He wants to do what's in line with Dharma. And so he's trying to learn about the characteristics of a perfected yogi to say, okay, would that kind of person, what kind of decision would that person make in this circumstance? So right now we're in this section of maybe 12 verses where Krishna's answering Arjuna's question and telling him all about a perfected yogi. And this is so helpful for us because it's descriptive of a perfected yogi, a seer, somebody who has pretty much realized the absolute truth. But it's also prescriptive for us. It gives us kind of some direction, kind of a North Star of how we can try to conduct ourselves in this world and aspire to those kinds of standards. Though, most of us, it's a pretty high standard. So it's definitely a process, but we can work towards it together, which is why we're here. So, and the section before this that we talked about last week and maybe the week before, we talked a lot about karma yoga, which is dedicating the fruits of your actions to God with detachment from them. So we're not attached to the fruits of our actions for selfish reasons. We're really dedicating them to God. And in that way, we can become like exempt from this karmic reactionary kind of world that we live in, where, whatever energy we put out there, we get back. That's like the law of karma, right? If we kind of retract ourselves from selfish action, then we retract ourselves from being subjected to those kind of laws, and we connect with God. And that's what we try to aspire to. So we learned a lot about karma yoga, and we'll talk about it more and more. But that was the previous section. So today we're going to start at chapter 2, text 56. And I'll share my screen. Let me just pull this database up. Okay. So chapter 2, text 56. Okay. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there's happiness, and is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So when Arjuna asked his question to Krishna, there was kind of 4 parts to the question. He asked how a perfected yogi restrains their senses, how a perfected yogi engages their senses. He asked how a perfected yogi responds to life's ups and downs, and what is their key characteristics. So Krishna's going to answer his overall question in these kind of 4 different categories. And this verse, Krishna's answering how a perfected yogi responds to life's ups and downs. So speech can be either self-talk or inner talk. And this verse talks about how talks about the self-talk that is going on. So when in a wave of happiness and distress, we get elated and we get dejected. But a stage of steady mind always stays steady in these waves. You know, when we think about, we go through our days or we go through our weeks, good things happen to us and then bad things happen to us. And what happens is we kind of attach ourselves to those emotions, right? If something good is happening to us and we're in a good mood and we're showing up positively and we're like full of Om Shanti Shanti. And then as soon as, you know, something bad happens to us, we're attached to that and we kind of show up with that energy. Right. And in that way, these waves kind of control us. We're kind of like on a roller coaster with these waves of these circumstances of our lives. And this is what a sage is able to avoid, because internally he's so steady. So we look at these waves of happiness and distress we've talked about so many times. If we break them down further, we can say that like at the very top of this wave, we have desire. And at the bottom of the wave, we have fear. And we really want to obtain our desires. And when we do, we're happy. And when we don't, you know, we're fearful. And then on the way down, we're angry. On the slope down, if we're realizing that we're not going to actually obtain our desires, we're angry. And then we go back to fear. And this is just the cycle of like our lives, really, of our days, of our weeks. This is what our material existence kind of is when we break it down. So this cycle keeps us caught in dualities. And what this verse is saying is that by focusing on one spiritual connection, we can be free from this. So that's the way out of it. We just talked about the way out of, you know, being in the karmic system where for every action that we put out in the world, there's going to be a corresponding karma that we accumulate that we have to pay for. You know, like if we're mean to somebody, then somebody's going to be mean to us, like that kind of philosophy. To get out of that, we have to selflessly give the fruits of our actions to God. This is kind of saying a similar concept in that to get out of these waves of material distress and happiness that really control us, we have to focus on our spiritual connection and identity. And what we'll realize is that the more time that we spend engrossed in these things, dedicated towards our spiritual practice, the more that we'll be able to show up with a steady mind to these kinds of circumstances. And in that, they'll just start to lessen naturally. They'll start to, their grip on us will start to kind of lessen. And then it'll be a little bit more steady. It won't be so up and down. It'll be a little bit more, we'll still have ups and downs, but they'll subside a little bit. It'll be less severe. And this experience of fear and anger that we talk about it's not like fear and anger is bad. Avoid fear and anger because it's going to happen to you. There's like no way around it. And we can't just fake that we're somewhere that we're not. But what we want to be careful about is when this experience of fear and anger controls us. And we've all been there, right? It's not about just like being happy all the time or, you know, the superficial, like, oh, everything's great and my life is perfect. You know, that's not really helping anybody. But at the same time, we can't become so consumed by these emotions that they control us. Right? We've all been there. Like we're so upset about something that then the next 3 people we see, we're taking it out on. Or, you know, we're upset about the way something is. And so our next actions, we're trying to, you know, control the situation when really we just need to accept it and accept that we're going to be upset. So this can be a pretty tough practice because when we're experiencing these emotions in the moment, they feel like they completely overtake us at times. So, and this is, I know some of us, like I know I grew up in a household where it was like, it was not okay to have emotions. It was kind of like you were like weak if you were emotional about something and to show emotions. And that made it really confusing because it was like, I never knew where I was or where I wasn't. You know, it was like, I don't really know how I feel about this because I've completely suppressed my emotions to the point where I'm not even in touch with myself anymore. And how do we grow in that kind of environment? You know, how do we actually, because our emotions are just such wonderful triggers to tell us what's actually going on, you know, maybe something's a little bit off, or maybe there's some kind of attachment that we have that we haven't really dealt with and we need to dig into further. So it's really learning to use our emotions in that way, you know, using our emotions as informers, which is wonderful, and not insiders, which is bad, right? We don't want to just be impulsive because we're feeling a certain way at a certain time. So it's creating, we talked about that before too, right? Creating that space between the stimulus and response so that we can show up and as the highest versions of ourselves. So that's the danger with anger, is that if we let it control us, it can take us off our path. So we have to become really intentional when we're experiencing these things, to kind of stop, to take a breath, maybe remove ourselves, maybe do some pranayama. Maybe sometimes if I'm feeling a really intense energy, I do some kind of like yoga or workout. Let your mind settle and come back. You know, some kind of soothing technique so that we can ground and we can come back and make higher decisions rather than impulsive decisions. Right. And that's what the characteristics of the seer are. They go beyond dualities because they're not controlled by their emotional drives. Doesn't mean they don't have them, but they're not controlled by them. And that's so powerful. Does anyone want to share anything about that? I would love to hear somebody's experience with that or perspective on that. Trevor.
Yeah, that's like you said, such a very essential part of the book, man. That's like, because when you're going through this stuff, you're like, wow, I thought I already overcame anger or fear or whatever, you know. It's like this. I love the Gita because it explains like you're human for feeling that stuff. Like we have this idea that when we're coming into our soul purification process, before we fully understand it, it's like, I did all this work. Should I still be feeling this way and whatnot? And we beat ourselves up if we have anger arise because of how much confusion there is with the soul purification process, you know. And it's just simple tips like uh not identifying with it, you know, like that, like you said, letting it control you is a whole different story, but having it is okay. You know, you're going to have anger arise, and you're going to have depression occur in different ways, you know. So this book teaches you how to be creative with it. It's like you're supposed to have it as part of your facility for healing. So it's not about annihilating all your desires or your emotions. It's about utilizing them in the service of Krishna, and how you can progress with it. You know, use it as fuel to move forward. Because I know if none of us had any adversities or intense obstacles, we wouldn't be sitting here together right now. You know, they're very essential, more so than everything going smooth sailing for us in our lives. So uh just like whenever it happens, you have to use those tactics, like you're saying, the hatha yoga, the pranayama, you know. Instead of reacting whenever it arises, take a second and observe it before you respond instead of react. And therefore you have control over it. You're able to use it as fuel to progress and to serve, you know. So
Yeah.
that's what I
No.
like about this book and this part of the book and whatnot. So everything you're saying was really hitting home with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's so it's really, it can be a beautiful process when you look at it that way, when you can say, wow, when you can step away from your emotions and kind of become the observer, like you said, and say, this is really shaking me up. And it's like, usually I wouldn't be so shooken up by this circumstance, but for some reason, this unique set of circumstances is shaking me up. And then you kind of start to, you know, peel all the layers and figure out what's really going on. Like, what am I really attached to? What am I really afraid of? And how can I purify that and use that to be closer to God, to let go of some kind of misconception that's misguiding me and shaking me up. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else want to share about that, or maybe share how you cope with that if you're feeling really emotional, how you create that distance between stimulus and response, because that can be a really tricky thing. Does anybody feel like they have any insight on how to do that, or how their progress is going with that?
Yeah, chanting, japa.
Oh,
Japa is like one of the backbones to the healing process. If you're not able to full blown sing and dance, the japa meditation really pulls you through some serious stuff whenever you're down and whatnot. It can really muscle you through your obstacles, regardless of what they are. I've noticed, and your emotions can get pretty intense, and also the way you think and speak to yourself, you know,
mm,
because there's a guy named Dr. Emoti who did an experiment with water, and he was showing how sensitive it was to energy, and he would write words on it, love and hate, and then observe it under a microscope, and it would, and the love energy just from the word alone would create like snowflakes and all kinds of beautiful harmonic uh geometry, and then the other water would look like a disease. And
yeah,
so we're made of almost all water, so it's very essential to know that stuff. So the way we're thinking carries a vibration, the way we're speaking to ourselves. So whenever you have an intense emotion arise, instead of saying I am angry, because when you say I am, you're affirming, you're making an affirmation, you're embodying anger, you're becoming the
right.
embodiment of that. So to stay in that space of observation, the way you can cast a different spell on yourself is saying, I am feeling symptoms of anger, I am feeling symptoms of depression. And that from there, then you can add a method in on top of it, like chanting or yoga. It all goes
Yeah.
hand in hand.
Yeah, that's so nice. Like not over identifying with your emotions, like knowing they're not you. In the same way, we're not the body, we're not our emotions, and just cognitively creating that space. That's beautiful. The other thing I liked you said is treating ourselves with that love and compassion, almost like we would a child, when we see them throw a tantrum. We put our arms around them. We know in the bigger context of things that their tantrum is not really that big of a deal, but we still give them that space and we love them and we hold them in that way. And so oftentimes we don't do that for ourselves. We need to think of ourselves like these little children that are just kind of recovering and give ourselves that love and grace. Katie, please share with us.
Thanks. Hi, Paul. I was thinking similar. I go to Japa too, pretty quick. Well, quick as I can, I guess. If you're even like say in the middle of the night, you're kind of woke up and don't know why, and your mind's going, or it's reflecting back on something that made you angry or was difficult, and um, yeah, it's so helpful to just be like, nope, and start the Maha mantra, just right where you are and just move your mind. Just be like, okay, let me just try to just repeat. Um, and it's amazing how it can just soften and take our mind over from whatever we're too stuck in anger or fear or just and the repetitiveness of that. Boy, we spend a lot of time like in our minds. And so I was really feeling that from Trevor. And then also sometimes with what you're saying about how we talk to ourselves and treat ourselves, sometimes I'll hear like my grandma's voice, who hasn't been in the body for a while now, and a particular and Baba sometimes like would just the two main people who have told me don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, and like that is helpful. And that can also shift your mind away from like the kind of repetitive raging thoughts, as like a
Yeah.
soft, like a way someone else speaks to you,
Right.
which is really,
Because
really helpful. And then, yeah, a few years back now, like my husband and I were having a big fight, and I don't even remember what it was about. And he was like, I'm going outside for a minute, which was probably a great idea. And I was sitting there like still really upset inside. And I just had to, and this was like a while back. So I wasn't really at the point yet where I was like, okay, Japa. So and I just felt the sensation, like it was really like a cry out to Krishna moment. And I just like said the Maha Mantra, and it was weird. It was like quite an amazing moment where I feel like it was the thing that really, his wise choice to go do a soothing thing, and then Krishna helping me. And otherwise it was good. It was a mess, in that moment. And that example jumped in my mind for sure. And then also with, sometimes it's useful. Like we're saying, we don't want to like just suppress and ignore, and sometimes I think it helps our dharma to have some of these emotions that might lead us to like more compassion for others and standing up for people and stuff like that. And one of my devotee friends, we really relate with like work problems, and sometimes we really are like, I feel like you're talking about my work, and yeah, and we're talking about the higher ups, and I think that the ability to choose when it's worthwhile to get a little more in that mode of emotion and like talk and relate with people, but then also be able to like, okay, now if the weekend's coming, let's let it go, and be able to kind of go there, but also come back when it's very
Yeah.
useful, is a nice way to kind of like relate with people, and some of these experiences of uncomfortability and anger moments help us have an experience that'll make us be able to help someone else later, so I think, yeah, we do need them, but to be able to get out of that tailspin is so helpful.
Yeah, I love that you put that in there of how sometimes it can be humbling for us to experience this because it gives us more perspective as to like, oh, like this is actually now I can understand how this person felt when they went through this because I'm
Yeah.
going through it, and it connects us more in that way. That's beautiful. And also, have you ever noticed when you do kind of let go of your problems and do a spiritual practice, when you come back to it, it's either like not so big or suddenly it's like kind of clear of what this solution is. Like we don't have to try so hard. That was something I learned in spiritual life that I loved. It's like I don't have to try so hard to solve my own problems. If I just give it space and really take shelter of God, my problems somehow kind of end up fixing themselves a lot of times. It's like kind of amazing and so much less stress and energy.
Yeah, get
Thank
yourself out of the way a little, and remember Krishna's path for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Katie.
Thanks.
Mariah, please share with us.
Haribol. Can everyone hear me okay? I have
Yeah,
headphones in, so I'm not sure how the Bluetooth works.
it's great.
Yeah, I just want to, everything everyone is saying resonates so much, especially as like within the past year, just learning to let go of a lot of negative self-talk and allow myself to have emotions. Like you were saying, like in my family, we grew up, it was like emotions were just like, you're tired, go to sleep, like you're upset, you're
Mm,
tired, go take a nap, or like whatever, like, oh, stop being so whatever. And allowing myself the space to feel my emotions and recognize them as information giving tools has been like a whole new practice for me, like within the past year. And it's amazing. Like I've known it for a while, but actually practicing it, I would say one of the ways I practice it is like, okay, I'm starting to notice I'm feeling off, like I'm moody, I'm whatever. One of the biggest things that helps me is I write it down. Like I journal it a lot.
mm,
Like I'll just take the time and I'll just let out everything that my mind is saying. And then I'm like, okay, is any of this actually true? You know, or how can I look at this differently? Or what is this teaching me? What is this showing me? And like asking those questions after you write it all down and write it out. Because, you know, a lot of times when I finally give myself the space to feel them, it's like late at night, there's no one to call. So it's like, okay, let's just write it down, you know? And yeah, that's huge. And then trying to like shift the thought pattern around it, like, okay, you're not messed up because this happened. This just happened. And then adding in that acceptance, adding in, you know, this is how it is. And another huge thing is just like, yeah, Krishna's in control. Like you said, like when we when we take a moment to realize like, okay, I don't have to fix it, I don't have to do anything with it, I can just let it be and accept it, and I can go on and do something else or my spiritual practice, then like all of a sudden you come back to it and you're like, oh, it doesn't even bother me anymore or it's fixed or there's a solution for it. So yeah, that was really really nice learning that, and it's so nice to meet others who are learning that too. And then one other thing I wanted to share, I did this course with Mother Sukavaha over the summer, and Gaura Shakti Prabhu from New Vrindavan was also in the course. And it was all about feelings and emotions and how, you know, even great saintly people, they still experience their emotions. And so Gaura Shakti shared a moment where Prabhupada had visited New Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was doing initiations. And, you know, before you get initiated, you're supposed to start wearing your Tulsi necklace beads. And he was very angry that certain devotees didn't have their Tulsi beads on and they're getting ready to get initiated. And for a moment, he like raised his voice and he used his anger to get his point across because he was angry about it, but he wasn't controlled by it. He expressed it. He said, "Where's their Tulsi?" But it was so stern, and everyone in the room was like, you know, Gaur Shakti explained, he was like, we had never seen him so angry, you know, but he was angry. He's like, this is how it should be. And but then they got the Tulsi, and they got their Tulsi neck beads, and then they came back, and he was like, nothing ever happened. So he expressed it, and he moved on from it. It didn't control him. He didn't go into a whole spiral for a whole week of being angry or however long. It was just like in that moment, he was angry, he expressed it, it was done. You know, and so it's not like emotions are something to overcome. You know, that's another huge thing I've been learning. It's not something to like overcome or gain control over or be better than. It's like, no, it's a part of who we are, and it's something to be used to express ourselves, you know. So
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
getting skillful at that. And it sounds like that example, Prabhupada was so skillful at that.
Yeah.
I love that he's able to express it, but then step away from it. And for
Yeah.
us, that kind of sometimes just takes like acceptance of whatever it is. We express and then we just accept, and we
Mhm.
move on, and we don't let that energy propagate into our days or weeks or
And just like fester.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brittany, your hand was up. I want to hear from you too.
Oh, everybody's pretty much said what I was thinking, but I can maybe just reiterate in my words. I've lately, when I've had this come up, I really like what Trevor was saying is I try not to identify with it first. And my words lately have been, let's just say anger. I have anger moving through me, right? I have anger energy moving through me right now. This isn't permanent because I do think it's really important. Our internal dialogue becomes what we are. So I think shifting that internal dialogue first for me has been crucial. And then after that, the next thing I'm doing is what do I need in this moment? And then I try to communicate those needs to the people around me, but they're not always going to listen. I just had this example last night. I had some anger moving through me, and I was trying to communicate to my family what I needed. I just weren't able to give that to me in the moment. So then the next thing that I'm doing is removing myself from the situation. I had to go for a walk and just kind of not be in that, like recognize that in that moment, I'm not my best self. And I don't have to try to be everything in that moment. I can literally take a step away and come back later. And then finally, like this morning, I'm asking, like my big mantra lately has been, whatever emotions are showing up, how can I greet it at the door with a smile and invite it in for tea and see what it has to teach me? You know, I've noticed that a lot of my major like big emotions that come up are actually reflections of something that's going on within myself, something that I've done to myself. It's really typically not, if I really get to the essence of it, it's not really about what the other people are doing or saying or being. There's something in me that's not quite healed or traumatized, or I've done that to someone else so many times, and now I'm so, anyways, I just wanted to reiterate a lot of what you guys said. This is just so valuable because the point isn't to not ever feel the emotions, it's to work with them and how to befriend the discomfort, you know, how to make a new relationship with that so that it doesn't propel us into these spirals. Yeah, this is such a great conversation. Thank you for letting me share.
Wow, so beautifully said, Brittany. Brittany's so insightful. Brittany's one that when I'm struggling, I text and she sends me insightful advice to help me. I so appreciate Brittany. Thank you, Brittany. Poppy. This
Hi,
is so
well,
wonderful.
I think
Hi,
everybody
Val.
said it, but one thing I wanted to that resonated with me was I struggle with dealing. I think a lot of my suffering is from accepting the dualities of life. I think that's I'm either I operate from all or nothing. I mean, that's something I'm working on, but I feel like that's the root cause of my suffering. But one thing, as everybody was sharing, was I am somebody, and I feel like there's other people who go into comparing mode when we hear things like people go to, like when Trevor and someone else was sharing that they go to Japa. Like when I'm angry, when I'm upset, Japa doesn't come to my mind, you know. And then I think I have to tell myself and remind myself I'm not at that level yet, or I'm not there yet, and that's okay. And that these are my emotions. This is what I can do right now is express my emotions and have them come out. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that it's okay to be where I am. It's okay to show up and do what I'm doing, even if it's throwing my iPhone and buying another one. It's not okay because it costs me. It's not okay. But yes, there were times that I did it, but I feel like the lesson I learned was, well, I was financially stressed because of that. Now I have to find another way to do it. So I think it's very important, and it goes back to showing, you know, having self-compassion for ourselves and our journey, because each of us will experience, you know, all emotions very different way, although it has one name. Because underneath the anger, there's a whole bunch of, you know, the type of the iceberg is anger. On the bottom, I might be having shame. Trevor might be having sadness. Brittany might be having, you know, something else. And it's just an unique experience. And I think that's where we can have compassion for ourselves, saying, you know, this is what I have today, and I'll work my way up to pick up Japa and not throw my iPhone.
Javi, I love that so much. And you know what? I was thinking the same thing when they were talking about Japa. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Because I've gone through stages in my life where I'm chanting 64 rounds a day. And then I've gone through stages where I'm so upset that the best I can do is like take a kickboxing class. And if I'm seeing like a Japa bag, I'm ready to kick that across the room. Like I don't think it is about comparison or about exactly what you said. We're all at different places at different times, and we don't even know where anybody else is, or so it's not even worth getting into that, you know. We just do the best we can. I love how you said that. Thank you. Baba Mai. Please share.
Good day, everyone. I'm just leaving out the house for work, but I just wanted to share. I met this guy yesterday when I was out doing book distribution, and And the guy, he was suffering from multiple sclerosis. And so when I first started speaking with him, he said that he had a leg injury. But then he ended up, I guess, just speaking with me, he felt comfortable to actually share with me that he was suffering from MS. And so he was telling me how by him suffering, it opened up this pathway to where he's more connected with his spiritual life, and his spiritual journey, and how he's able to appreciate, and how even though his body is hurting, how he's the most happy and at peace that he's ever been. And he also said one of the things that he did when he first started suffering is he sent letters out to everybody. Like I don't know if it was just like he actually wrote it, but he did tell me that everyone that he sent a message to, he did a personal message. He said he sent it out to his friends and his family, and he addressed them all personally, and he was just telling them how much he appreciated them, and and just encouraging them. And it was just nice to hear how even though he was suffering, and he said that he didn't tell them, like nobody knew what he was going through, but he just used it as an opportunity to share with other people. And he said it made him feel better. It made his body feel better, and it settled his spirit. And I just thought that that was very, very powerful, that he was able to take a crisis situation and use it as an opportunity to be able to lean into God, and be able to empower others and empower himself just by doing that gesture. So that's one of the that I like to do. Like if I'm struggling with something, I like to help people in whatever area that I'm struggling in. And I know that, well, I'm not doing it because I want the help, but it just lets me know this is an opportunity for me to be able to assist someone else. And just to hear him speaking like that yesterday, it just really touched my heart.
Wow. That's incredible. Such a testament to how strong just changing that perspective can be. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I guess it's like next time we're upset, if we could just think of like one up, like one better than where we are, like how can we get to just a little bit of better place? Whether that's japa, whether that's some kind of exercise, whether that's taking physical space from the situation, whether that's helping somebody else, whatever it is, depending on the severity of the emotion and where we are at the time, what can we do to just make a little bit better decision than we would? And we grow like that. Okay, Trevor, you want to finish this conversation off and then we'll move to the next verse?
Sorry, I just wanted to throw in there. Yeah, I really like what Hopi was saying about just embracing where you're at. It's such a powerful tip. And it's like, it's not about worrying about where you're gonna be or anything like that. The biggest tip I can give that goes along with that is just give yourself room to grow. Let yourself make mistakes. And if you fall on your butt, it's the perfect opportunity to get a good view of the stars and gain inspiration and get back into it. That's all.
Thank you, Trevor.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, because nobody has it all figured out. And if people look like they do, then you probably don't know them well enough. We're all in this together. We wouldn't be here. So thank you. Okay, 257. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Okay, so this verse speaks to the outer talk. There's a lot about inner talk and dualities. Now we're talking about the outer talk. So when we have this wave of material happiness and distress, now what we have at the top of the wave is praise, when somebody's praising us. And then the bottom of the wave is criticism, when somebody's critical of what we're doing or what we're saying. And that's a whole difficult thing in itself, right? Is when we're happy when people approve of us, and when they don't, it's it's pretty, it can rock us, right? So if we look at this pendulum and we say, our response to this duality, this particular duality of praise and criticism, we can either become obsessed with it, like, again, I always talk about celebrities, but celebrities like are, looking up every review and reading everything everybody says about them, and it's just occupying their whole mind, or oblivious, like, okay, I'm not even going to read that review or touch that, or I'm just going to act like it's not happening. But what we want to do to get real strength is the middle would be to be aware of it, aware of the dualities, but aware of the reality beyond the dualities, right? That's what we're here. So we have to understand with criticism and praise, there's going to be some amount of, it's going to affect us to some point. But what we really want to work at is getting to that steadiness where we can be aware of it, but we're so aware of the reality beyond the duality that it doesn't affect us so much. So it's not numbing out or dumbing down, but it's more just kind of blocking out because it's not so important. It's just kind of like radio chatter, because we're not putting our whole self-worth into what other people think of us, right? And that's such a tough thing to do, but what we'll find is when we're able to do this more expertly, and when we really take shelter of God, we can show up more authentically and real in our relationships with others, in our relationship with ourselves. And then what ends up happening is all of those relationships become stronger because we're not so caught up in them. Right? So this is another characteristic of the seers. They don't become consumed by dualities. They have better things to speak about. It's not about, they're not spending all this time gossiping about people, or that, who was it, Socrates, who said that small minds talk about people. It's like the what. Average minds discuss events. That's like the how. Great minds discuss ideas. That's like the why. Like, why are we here? Right? So we don't make small talk into big talk or only talk. And we just don't let it consume us too much, because we recognize that spending all this time talking about people or events, or it's just not that important, honestly, and it's going to change. And so we don't want to waste so much time speaking about it or thinking about it. And at the same time, we don't want to let ourselves become too affected by it when other people do it. So it's just kind of putting it in perspective, right? Broadening our perspective. Like the same building looks huge if I'm standing next to it, but it looks small if I'm in a helicopter over it. And that's the kind of vantage point we want to get over some of these things, both in our lives, both in the way that we show up. So the things that we talk about and we spend a lot of time thinking about, and how we're affected by these things. It kind of goes together. And as we're, working on our relationship with God, as we take more shelter of that, this is something that just kind of happens naturally. We don't have to waste so much time talking about what he did or she said or he said. We're not so bogged down in it ourselves. We have that perspective, we're in that helicopter looking at the building. We know it's not that big. We're not standing right next to it, so intimidated by it and kind of, again, letting it control us in that way. So it's examples like this, like noise canceling microphone that I use, I'm talking. Meanwhile, my husband's like microwaving food. I'm hearing all these things going off. You guys probably can't hear them at all because this microphone is canceling them out just automatically. And you can only hear my voice. And that's how we want to be a spiritualist. We just naturally, things can't get through. They can't penetrate us because they're background noise. They're just small and they're going to change. And if we give into them too much, then they can become big and in that way, take over. And that's exactly what we don't want. So we have to that's so important to keep that perspective. It's keep the small things small and the big things big. This was like marriage advice given to me by my teacher on my wedding day, who his teacher gave to him on his wedding day. And we all know that's so useful in a relationship, keeping the small things small and the big things big. It's like if we're driving on a crowded lane and we notice someone driving wildly on an adjacent lane, but if we get angry at their terrible driving and yell at them, we may run into danger in our lane. So we want to stay in our lane, and we want to stay in our lane, figuratively, metaphorically, and our lane is we're on a mission in this life, right? We are committed to spiritual growth and evolution. And if we get caught up in these dualities, they will pull us away. So we have to be really careful. Kind of like, again, the mind's a computer screen, and there's all these constant pop-ups that come with no way to dismiss them. They're just constantly popping up in our screen, in our vantage point. And what we have to learn to do is to neglect them. And we have to neglect the small things so we can focus on the big things. Because again, the more we dwell on anything, big or small, the more it dwells in our consciousness. And thereby it makes the other things small. So if we focus on big things and keep the small things small, that's how it'll stay. But it takes discipline, and it takes intention, mindfulness. We have to, again, really keep a grasp on where we are. Am I spending too much time talking about people or events? Am I too caught up in, what's going on with the election? Which, is important, and these things have relevance, but again, not to the point where they consume us and our energy and our consciousness, because we know what's the most useful, what's most useful to put our consciousness into, what's most useful, what's most conducive to our growth, where we're going to feel the most connection. And it's not obsessing over the election. Even though we may have an interest in it, we have to keep these things in perspective. And the Gita expands our vision of what big things are. That's why the Gita is here for us. The Gita is constantly reminding us we are souls on a journey of spiritual evolution. And it tells us, like Trevor said, during this evolution, we're going to face many material ups and downs. That's the nature. That's what life is here on this temporary platform. So buckle up. You're going to be in for some ups and downs. If we focus in all situations on how we can evolve spiritually and thus keep the big things big in our consciousness, we can progress calmly through all forms of material disturbance towards eternal transcendence. And that's what we're doing here. And I forget which one of you talked about that really nicely, how we can use these situations to evolve, and I think it was Katie. So we could use these situations to connect more to other people, to understand other people better. We talked a lot about how we can use these situations to understand ourselves better, right? What's limiting us? What are we attached to? What kind of material identity can we shed so that we can take more shelter in our spiritual identity? So that's what we're doing here. And that's the purpose of this Gita. And it's so wonderful because the Gita tells us both the how and the why, what we're doing here. And I know I was always really interested in the how. I never had a whole picture of the why until I got into spiritual life and reading the Gita and other similar texts. And for me, it was like, why make a good decision for myself? Like, why does it matter? Why not just, YOLO, like, I'll just, date that person, even though I know they're not good for me, or make this impulsive decision, even though I know I'm going to pay for it later. Why not? So it's so nice that the Gita gives us this perspective of what we're actually doing here, why our decisions are important, why it's important to take this space between stimulus and response, where we're actually going with that. And as we lean into that, we see it in our lives. We see that we do feel more connected. We do feel more sheltered. We do feel more grounded and steady and stable. And there's benefit to that because we obtain this connection with transcendence, with the spiritual world. And that's what spiritual life does for us. So that's why all these things are important. Not just like, oh, to be a good person. That always drove me crazy too. Like, okay, well, I don't care about being a good person. Like, whatever. It's stupid. You're lame, But it's not about that. It's not about being good or bad, it's about connection. And that's what the Gita is teaching us. So that's as far as we'll get today. Does anybody else want to share any final reflections on On that, Mariah.
Yeah. What's coming to me, you're like, you're saying like, the ultimate goal is that connection with transcendence and when we take it even the step deeper of like God is a person that we can have a personal relationship with, it's like it's actually the ultimate love story. It's like um it's like, yeah, okay, we're going through all these hard things and it's hard to see in the moment because it's so painful and it hurts so bad. But really, it's all like a reminder that it is temporary here, that it's not where we belong, and that Krishna, the person God wants you to come back to him. He's like telling you like, hey, I know it's really rough down there for you, but I promise you, if you take shelter of me, I am your ultimate well-wisher, I am your best friend, I am your ultimate lover. I am the one who knows how to love you best. And yeah, that's like another thing I'm really trying to like meditate on is like, okay, everything I've been through has been for my own spiritual well-being. It's not always easy to see in the moment or even after, but sometimes you get to that point where you do see it and you're like, wow, like if I hadn't gone through that and learned that lesson, who knows where I would be today, And really it's like Krishna just wants me to come back home and remember him and to connect with him. And it's like, okay, like then why don't I just do that? But we're so stubborn sometimes. But well, I'm so stubborn sometimes. I shouldn't say we, but yeah, so I don't know, that's just like kind of what's coming to me. It's like trying to remember he's our best friend. He knows what's best for us. And yeah, it hurts like hell here in the moment sometimes, but it's because it's not our natural position. It's not where we actually belong. So, thank you.
So nicely said. Beautiful. Thank you. The ultimate love story. That's the title for this episode. Love that. I'm such a hopeless romantic. I'm so into that. The ultimate love story. It's the only unconditional love you'll find in this world. I mean, I was just talking to Todd about this yesterday, right? This unconditional love. We all want unconditional love. This is it. This is how you get it. Trevor.
Sorry, I'll try to make it quick. I really like that what you just said, Mariah. The personal relationship, but what I find so fascinating is that there really is only one relationship that's occurring through the illusion of multiplicity. Like the relationship we have with the divine is happening in the details of this life. We're connecting to Krishna more and more the more we connect to each other. It's a really beautiful dance we're doing together, through our experiences and through everyone that we come in contact with. This relationship with Krishna is always an occurrence in the background of it all. And the more we work on that relationship, the stronger our connection we have with spirit gets, the more it heals all the details and all the other relationships and circumstances we experience. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, like God comes through his devotees, those who are more in connection with him. He comes through them to interact with us, right? Like that's kind of what I'm getting from that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Beautiful. Thank you both. Anybody else before we have to get out of our bubble for the day? This is such like a safe space for me. I hope you all feel the same. You've created such a safe space here for us all to be and grow together. One more before we go? Maybe someone we haven't heard from yet today? Oh, Neil, do you want to talk? You're on mute, Neil.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was fortunate to be in Sedona last week, and I was kind of, I don't know if I was quite angry, but I was upset because a couple weeks before, I had developed plantar fasciitis, and so my heel is in great pain as I walk too many distances. In the past, when I've been out there, I've taken these incredibly long hikes and gone to these vortexes, and we went out with a spiritual guide, a Native American, and she showed us these. Oh, well, why don't we just walk down here a half a mile, and we'd be at these amazing vistas, and the divine was surrounding us, and it's just it was just amazing that how upset I had been that I wasn't going to be able to go to these places. And she said, "Oh, well, let's just go. Here's a spot. Let's meditate." And she told us about several other spots that my wife and I went to, and it just seeing the divine all around and feeling the divine, coming up through the rocks, and feeling the connection with my wife. It was. It allowed us to slow down rather than spending time, doing these 8-10 mile hikes to get up to these amazing spots. We found that anyway, so it wasn't. Yeah, it was just really, really amazing to get upset and then realize that's fine. You just sit here and relax and meditate. You just sit here and feel the divine all around you. You don't have to be hiking all day to do that. So it was yeah, it was really sweet. So.
Mm. So nice. This is spiritual life. That's it. This broadening of the perspective. This evolving our consciousness. That's the work. Thank you so much for sharing. Beautiful story. Okay, so that's it for today. I will see you all on Thursday. Thank you for coming and sharing your hearts. And if you're not live and you're listening to this and you want to come share your heart with us, please come. If you go onto Instagram, Seekers Quest 108, in the link tree in the bio, you can get on the WhatsApp thread. And in that way, you'll get the Zoom links and connect with all of us. So please come and share. And thank you all for being on this journey together.
Hi, Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Bye.
Hi,
Haribol.
Bo.
Haribol.
Haribol.